If you've ever listened carefully to how government officials speak, you'll notice something strange. Their words often sound like they mean something, while carefully meaning nothing at all. Every sentence is a balancing act, a shadow between truth and denial. Now imagine one of those officials, standing before reporters, explaining a ghost story. Imagine the calm voice saying, "The events remain unexplained, but steps have been taken to reassure the staff." That was the official explanation given after what happened inside Murray House, the only haunting ever acknowledged by the Hong Kong government. 1. Back in the 1960s, Central wasn't the skyline of glass and light it is today. It was quieter, heavier, streets still remembering war, humidity clinging to every wall. On the lush slope of Garden Road stood an old English-style building, dark red brick, arched windows, and pillars that seemed far too serious for their surroundings. Murray House had stood since 1846, built for British officers but reborn under a dozen different flags and functions: army quarters, police station, prison, and finally a government office. Locals whispered that the walls still remembered every command, every scream, every confession forced in the rooms below. 2. Inside, the floors creaked like old men clearing their throats, and the corridors smelled faintly of ink, paper, and damp stone. On the second floor, the Civil Services Department worked through endless paperwork, the slow, grinding machinery of colonial administration. Among them was Mr. Chan, a quiet junior clerk with thick glasses and a habit of arriving earlier than everyone else. He wasn't superstitious. In his mind, ghosts were stories for grandmothers and construction workers. Promotions, on the other hand, that was something real. He had gotten his job through distant family connections, but ever since, he'd worked himself ragged to prove he belonged. The pay wasn't much, but if he worked long enough, stayed loyal enough, someone might notice. So he often volunteered for overtime, finishing reports long after the clock struck 9, and the tram lines below hissed into sleep. 3. Those who worked late described how the mood of the building changed after sunset. The fan seemed slower, the air thicker. Even the tick of the hallway clock took on an odd rhythm, like a heartbeat just slightly out of sync. On one particular night, the rain outside came down hard enough to blur the lights of Central. Everyone had gone home early, muttering about slippery roads and bad luck. Only Chan stayed, his desk lamp casting a yellow cone over unfinished forms. The sound of his pen against paper was hypnotic. Scratch, pause. Tick-tock. Scratch, pause. Time became distant, swallowed by the hum of rain. He leaned back for a moment to rest his eyes when it happened. At first, he thought it was the rain, some rhythmic tapping from outside. But it was too clean, too deliberate, a sound no storm could make. 4. Clack. Clack, clack. The crisp rhythm of a typewriter, an old mechanical Remington, the kind used in every department office. Chan froze. The noise came from room 207, just down the corridor. Everyone had gone home. He was sure of it. He called out softly, half hoping someone would answer. "Hello? Is someone still working?" No reply. The tapping continued, steady as a metronome. Then, for a few seconds, faster, like impatient fingers. Curiosity overruled fear. Holding his breath, Chan stood up, grabbed a flashlight from his drawer, and stepped into the corridor. 5. The hallway lights flickered, throwing shallow shadows against the walls. The sound grew louder with each step. Clack, clack, clack. Then silence. He reached room 207. The door was slightly ajar. A narrow ribbon of light spilled onto the floor. He pushed it open. Inside, the room was empty. Desks lined up, chairs pushed neatly in. The single typewriter sat on the far desk beneath a glowing desk lamp. A blank sheet rested in the roller. Not a single mark on it. Chan let out a shaky breath, feeling foolish. But as he turned to leave, something cold touched his wrist. He looked down. The metal typewriter key was vibrating, as if it had just been pressed. Then the lamp flickered and went out. 6. The room plunged into darkness. For a few seconds, he couldn't convince himself to move. His heart pounded against his ribs like it wanted to escape. Somewhere deep in the building, a floorboard groaned, slow, deliberate, as though someone was walking downstairs. Chan did not wait to see who. He shut the door, locked it, and ran. Morning brought disbelief and fear. When the office opened at 9, everyone froze in the doorway. All 12 typewriters from the floor, heavy, bolted machines, were now arranged in the middle of the room, perfectly lined up like soldiers awaiting orders. 7. Not one desk was disturbed. No signs of forced entry. No footprints on the tile. But each machine faced the same direction, toward the main door, as if waiting for someone who hadn't yet arrived. Chan didn't sleep much that week. He kept hearing phantom typing, soft laughter mixing with the hum of ceiling fans. His reflection in the black glass windows sometimes seemed a moment too slow to follow him. By Friday, no one stayed past sunset. Except him. Because Chan had seen the paperwork, knew how easily a man could vanish from promotion lists or payroll when his performance slipped. So he stayed. He told himself ghosts couldn't touch what they didn't believe in. But sometimes belief doesn't matter. The building remembers for you. 8. The rumors began quietly, like whispers in the dark, half laughter, half fear. Every department in the building had its own version of the story, but they all agreed on one thing. After sunset, Murray House changed. 1. Clerk said the air turned colder even when the fans stopped spinning. Doors that were locked would creak open by themselves. In one office, papers would sometimes appear signed with names of former employees, men long dead or transferred decades ago. By the second week, nobody wanted to work late anymore. Even the staff who once mocked the idea of ghosts started to pack up before 6. Lights on each floor went out like falling dominoes, windows dark, elevators still. But fear, like everything else, attracted attention. And that was when Mr. Johnson, the department's foreign superintendent, decided he'd heard enough. 2. Johnson was in his early 40s, clean-shaven, stern, always impeccably dressed in a gray suit. He believed in systems, not superstitions. Born in the British Isles, trained in decorum, he had learned early that the best way to control panic was to humiliate it. So when his subordinates whispered about laughter echoing through empty rooms, he called a meeting. That morning, the second floor's conference room was packed. Ceiling fans turned lazily, papers rustled nervously, and every glance avoided his gaze. He stood at the head of the table and spoke in that tone bureaucrats use when they think reason alone can rewrite reality. Everyone's performance has dropped this quarter, he said evenly. The department's production schedule is behind, and I hear excuses, rather creative ones about hauntings. Gentlemen, ghosts do not sign forms or file reports. Let's act like professionals. 3. Murmurs rippled through the room. One brave senior clerk, thin, gray-haired, cleared his throat. With respect, sir, he said, something is happening. We've all heard things, seen things. The men. Johnson raised a hand to silence him, lips curving just slightly. Then I suppose it falls to me to stay after hours and prove you wrong. A hush followed. Tonight, he added crisply, I'll stay until midnight. Alone. The look he gave them wasn't reassurance, it was challenge. 4. That evening, as the last tram rang its bell outside Garden Road, Johnson remained in his office, sipping cold tea from a porcelain cup. The sky outside had bruised into deep indigo. The building was silent, except for the faint hum of electricity and the occasional sigh of the walls settling. He flipped through papers, more out of stubbornness than necessity. The ticking clock on the wall counted down minutes slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. By 11, the silence pressed against his ears. He set down his pen and decided to take a round of the floor, a small act of dominance, as if walking the empty hallway would prove the ghosts served under him, too. He stepped out into the corridor. 5. The lights overhead flickered, throwing long shadows between doorways. His footsteps echoed sharp against the wood. Somewhere far away, a window banged open with a gust of wind, and the sound of rain whispered along the walls. Then he heard it, footsteps. At first faint, like someone pacing down another hall. Then closer. Not the quick steps of workers or the shuffle of cleaners, slow, deliberate, and heavy like boots dragging on wood. He He turned the corner and saw a shape at the end of the corridor, short, solid, walking away from him. "Hey, who's there?" Johnson called out sharply. "6." No answer. He walked faster, leather shoes snapping against the floor. "Do you hear me? Building's closed. Identify yourself." The figure stopped, and then turned. In the flickering light, he saw the truth. The man, or rather the thing, had no head. Nothing above the collar but emptiness, shining faintly red as if lit from inside. The shirt collar fluttered, as if wind passed through a throat that wasn't there. Johnson stumbled back, pulse hammering. His mind refused to process what he saw. His lips parted soundlessly. The figure took one step forward, then another. Its headless shoulders tilted slightly, like it was studying him, even without eyes. 7. The lamp at the end of the hall flickered again, and the entire corridor dimmed until only the outline of the ghost remained, glowing faintly in the dark. Johnson turned and ran. He didn't remember locking his office door or grabbing his briefcase. He only remembered the sound following him, the heavy footsteps, perfectly matching his own, until the front doors burst open and the rain swallowed him whole. The next morning, his office sat empty. His tea was still cold. The pen lay in the exact spot where he'd dropped it, but the chair was turned slightly away from the desk, as if someone had stood up in a hurry. By noon, a group of senior clerks gathered at the far end of the hallway, whispering. Some said Johnson had gone straight to the central government offices, demanding immediate transfer. Others claimed he'd been seen at the old cathedral that morning, pale as paper, crossing himself like a man who'd just stopped believing in logic. 8. That afternoon, the department received a confidential circular. All staff are instructed to avoid staying past standard working hours until further notice. The same evening, an unmarked black car arrived at Garden Road. 2 government officials in dark suits stepped out, their faces unreadable. They collected documents, sealed them in envelopes stamped internal record, and left without speaking to anyone. By Friday, news had spread beyond Murray House. Newspapers whispered about unnatural incidents. The administration tried to bury it, but the story already had teeth. And for the first time, whispers of ghosts had climbed past the office stairwell, straight into the mouth of official business. 9. The morning after Mr. Johnson's encounter, Murray House was quieter than ever. No one spoke above a whisper. The smell of fresh ink and old wood was mixed with something else now, a weight in the air, a shared memory they couldn't quite admit believing. 1. At 9 o'clock sharp, a black sedan rolled to a stop outside the main entrance. 2 senior officials stepped out in dark suits, their faces grim. They did not ask for anyone by name. They simply requested that the entire staff be assembled in the conference room. When they spoke, their voices were precise, measured, but the words landed like a knife. The issue at hand will be handled through appropriate channels. Appropriate channels meant something unthinkable, a ritual inside a government building. By noon, letters had been drafted and calls made. The Hong Kong Buddhist Association was officially contacted. Within days, the story leaked beyond Garden Road. Newspapers hinted at restless presences disturbing clerks, and the whole city began to watch Murray House again. 2. On Friday morning, the sky hung low and gray. A line of monks in saffron robes arrived at the gates, their banners, bells, and bronze bowls gleaming under the gloom. Work was suspended. Even the most skeptical clerks stood outside to watch. One of the younger clerks, Mr. Chan, stood at the edge of the crowd. He'd told himself he wouldn't believe, but his hands were still trembling from the last night he worked alone. 3. Inside, the monks set up an altar along the second-floor corridor. They placed bowls of rice and paper offerings on the floor and lit long sticks of sandalwood incense. The smoke rose slowly, curling around the iron railings, thick and fragrant, mixing with the smell of old wood and oil paint. Then the chanting began. Deep, steady tones rolled through the halls, reverberating off the stone walls like a low earthquake. The sound seemed to travel down into the floor and back up through their spines. 4. Television crews had arrived by then, their cameras clicking and rolling. The ritual had turned into a public event none could stop. Reporters whispered their commentary into microphones as officials watched with folded arms, pretending this was a normal Friday procedure. Mr. Chan felt his eyes sting from the incense. At the edge of his vision, something moved, a flicker between columns. When he looked again, only drifting smoke remained. 5. One of the monks began to walk slowly down the corridor, sprinkling holy water in wide arcs, his bare feet leaving faint prints on the dusty floorboards. Behind him, others chanted louder, their voices layering into a single rising sound that filled every corner of the building. A bronze bell rang at steady intervals, ding ding. Its echo felt more than heard. Then something unexpected happened. The lights flickered once, twice, and then brightened, steady and warm, as if the building took a long breath after decades of holding its lungs tight. 6. When the ritual ended, the corridors were quiet. The smoke hung low, drifting like mist after a storm. One by one, the monks bowed deeply toward the altar and left without speaking. Outside, the staff stood in disbelief. There were no noises, no laughter, no cold drafts from empty rooms. For the first time in weeks, Murray House felt normal, or perhaps just exhausted. That night, the building slept. Even the typewriters, those iron ghosts of commerce, stayed silent. 7. But bureaucracy never sleeps. 2 days later, a formal statement was drafted by the Government Information Services. The language was perfect, sterile, and brilliantly empty. Unexplained phenomena occurred within the Murray House premises. Buddhist representatives were invited to perform a ritual to ensure the safety and confidence of staff. The government offers no comment on matters outside scientific observation. The report was filed, stamped, and archived. But common people don't forget so easily. 8. By Monday, headlines across Hong Kong read, "Government admits to haunting, official ritual performed." Television segments showed monks chanting under dim lights, viewed by millions. For a brief moment, the entire city was united in a single question no politician wanted to answer. What else have you seen that we don't know about? Inside Murray House, workers returned to their desks. The fear faded like dust in sunlight, but never vanished entirely. Occasionally, a typewriter key would stick for no reason, or a draft would flutter though no window was open. 9. In time, other departments moved in and out. The building aged. When it was eventually dismantled and reconstructed in Stanley decades later, the workers found faint symbols carved beneath the floor planks. Tiny, almost invisible, like someone had scratched at the wood hoping to be remembered. Some say it was just graffiti from clerks long gone. Others believe it was something else, a signature from a ghost who finally got his paperwork approved. Because in Hong Kong, even the dead respect procedure. 10.